Hey guys, so in the previous class we have discussed about the electrical activity of the heart. So today we'll be discussing about the graphical representation of that electrical activity of the heart. So I had already drawn the diagram and I had already drawn all the waves, right? Because I don't want to make the video very long because otherwise it will be taking much data. So this is the graphical representation of the electrical activity of the heart, right? So it has got certain waves like P wave, Q wave, R wave, S wave, T wave, and all waves these are drawn in a baseline. So the line that you get to see, this dotted line, it is called as the baseline. And above this baseline, there are certain waves which are, you can see P wave, R wave, and the T waves. And below this baseline also there are certain waves. These are Q wave, S wave. So let me explain first how these waves will be generated and what this wave explains. See, we know that there are two chambers of the heart which receives the blood. The right chamber is called as the right auricle and this left chamber is called as the left auricle. So right auricle, it receives the blood from two vena cavas. One is the inferior vena cava which brings the blood from the lower part of the body, and one is the superior vena cava which brings the blood from the upper part of the body. And this left auricle, it brings the blood, okay, from the pulmonary veins, right? Left auricle receives the blood from the pulmonary veins, right, coming from the lungs, right? Now when the blood is received by these auricles, or when these auricular chambers will be filled with the blood, immediately the SA node, which is called as the pacemaker of the heart, and I had explained about the SA node that it will be generating its own impulse without any sort of external stimuli. So this SA node will be generating the impulse, and that impulse will be travel to the whole auricles, right? That impulse will travel to the whole auricle. So you can ask me a question that why the impulse it do not goes to the ventricles, why it is only restricted to the auricle or to the auricular chambers. It do not goes to ventricles because between the auricles and the ventricles there is a insulating substance, or there is an insulating material which is called as the annular pad, and this annular pad is made up of fibrous connective tissue. So this fibrous connective tissue, it prevents the, or it restricts the movement of this impulse from the auricles to the ventricles, right? So therefore there is a need of some sort of conducting system which will be passing that impulse from this which is received by the SA node to the ventricles, right? Okay, now let me explain one by one all the waves. So P wave, when these chambers will be filled with blood, then the P wave will be generating that impulse, the SA node will be generating that impulse, and that impulse will reach the whole auricles, that means the right auricle and the left auricle, and it will cause atrial depolarization. So that wave, the P wave, it represents that. So P wave, it represents generation of impulse by SA node and spreading of that impulse to the atria, causing atrial depolarization. And few milliseconds after the P wave, the auricles are going to contract, right? So here it is written that few milliseconds after P wave, atrial systole takes place. Okay, now this is P wave. Now that impulse which is generated by the SA node, it will reach the AV node, as I told. So there will be a time that will be required by the impulse to reach from SA node to AV node. So this is represented by PQ. So PQ, it represents the time taken by the signal or the impulse to travel from SA node to the AV node, right? Now there will be that now we'll explain this complex, that is Qrs complex. So what this complex represents, it represents the firing of impulse by AV node, and it represents ventricular depolarization. So that impulse, after it receives by the AV node, that impulse will be transmitted to the whole ventricles. So it represents, and because of that impulse, the ventricles will undergo depolarization. So it is explained by the Qrs complex. It represents firing of impulse by AV node, and it represents ventricular depolarization, right? Now what this Q wave it represents? So Q wave, it represents depolarization of interventricular septum, right? So after the impulse is received by the AV node, that impulse will be passed to this bundle of His, and from the bundle of His it will go to the left and right bundle of His, and left and right bundle of His, it is present in this interventricular septum. So Q wave, it represents depolarization of interventricular septum. After then, this left and right bundle of His, it is moving up, right? So this R wave, it represents depolarization of the main mass of ventricle. Main mass of ventricle is, that means this mass of the ventricle is the main mass of the ventricle, and this main mass of ventricle will be depolarized, and that is represented by the R wave. Okay, and it is going to the topmost position, you can see. And S wave, it represents the last phase of ventricular depolarization. Okay, it is the last phase of the ventricular depolarization, and in the S wave the whole ventricles are getting depolarized. During the ventricular depolarization, the auricles are getting, or the upper chambers are getting repolarized. Okay, so here I have written that atrial repolarization occurs at this time. ST wave, this is the ST wave. Here you can see a plateau stage. Okay, so in the ST waves the ventricles are going to contract, so the ventricles will be contracting and it is represented by the ST wave. So this ST wave, it is representing ventricular contraction or ventricular systole, and T waves, it represents ventricular repolarization. Okay, and it will be taking place after the ventricle undergo relaxation. So this is all about the okay, this electrical graphical representation of the electrical activity. Hope you have understood, and if you want to take notes, you can pause the video and you can read write all those waves, okay, about all those waves. Thank you guys, and meet you in the next video.